Welcome to the Sent from Disneyland podcast.
Here age relives fond memories of the past.
If it's your first time joining us, welcome. On this episode, we'll take a journey into the past and explore Disneyland and Disneyland history with mementos, snapshots, and postcards sent from Disneyland from 1955 to the present. Today, I'm starting off by thanking my patrons from patreon.com. You can join and receive mail from my desk or from my Disneyland trips. Special thanks to Random Olive, the first patron to this podcast, and to the e-ticket patrons Tania, Eric Daniels, Joe Gamble, Scott Booker, Monica Seitz Vega, Russ Romano, Michael and Christina Cross, Scott Cagle, and Sheila Harry. C-ticket patrons Serious Inquiries Only, Debbie Weinstein, Jennifer Schneep, Grace Coate, Brian Crawford, Ben and Noel Bruning, Patty Wolin, Angela Reynolds, and Aaron Moran. B-ticket patrons Jeff and Paige Orton, and Joshua, and Inexorable Tosh Bell. And the A-ticket patrons, Elise Sharp, Zealot Infinity, Alexis Robles, Maggie and Henry Byers, the Disney Rewind podcast, Angel DeBlock, and the All Aboard podcast. You can also sign up for my new newsletter for a chance to get some postcards delivered by the USPS to your mailbox. I am your host, your post-host Clocky, and today we have 2 postcards sent from Disneyland. The front of our first postcard has Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, and Pluto posing in front of Sleeping Beauty Castle. On the back it reads, "Smile Please." Mickey and his favorite friends pose for a group portrait in front of Disneyland's most picturesque location, Sleeping Beauty Castle. It's postmarked July 30th, 1991, with a Santa Ana cancel and a 19-cent Fawn postage stamp, Scott number 2479. I assume they visited the park on Tuesday, July 30th, 1991, when park hours were from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. The weather was a high of 78 and a low of 63. It's addressed to Mrs. R. L. McCollum of McMinnville, Oregon. It reads, 7/29/91. Dear Mom, we have had a great day, lots of people, but the lines do move quickly. Jenna likes the fast rides, so I do have someone to ride with. Dinner at Bear Country, saw a Small World, and rode the motorboats. Home shortly. Love you, Janie. As promised from the last episode, here is a newer postcard sent from Disneyland. I purchased around 60 postmarked postcards on my last trip to Anaheim, and while going through them, this one caught my eye. Recently, I was on an episode of Drafting the Magic podcast, and we discussed extinct attractions, and this postcard mentions an attraction that came and went and came back again, and is now likely extinct forever. The motorboat cruise that Janie is probably talking about was the motorboat cruise to Gummi Glen. This was originally a seasonal overlay to promote the Gummi Bear television show, which was part of the Disney Afternoon programming. The cover of the 1991 Disneyland map had drawings of Mickey and Minnie next to some of the characters from the Disney Afternoon, including Baloo, Louie, Tummy Gummy, Scrooge, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and Chip and Dale. This promotion also included a Chip and Dale's Rescue Ranger overlay of the Fantasyland Autopia. This was a time where there were still 2 Autopias running, one in Fantasyland and one in Tomorrowland. I talked about the Phantom Boats and the motorboat cruise back in episode 129, sent via a Phantom Boat. It's fun to see it directly mentioned on this postcard. Another fun detail in the message is the mentioning of Bear Country as where they were having dinner. Bear Country became Critter Country in 1988 in preparation for the new Splash Mountain attraction. This family must have been going for years, and still called it Bear Country because of the Country Bear Jamboree and having dinner at the Hungry Bear. Great news! Enfield Post is back up on Etsy. Grabbing some vintage stamps is a great way to plus your mail, whether you're trying to match the color of your postcard or envelope or adding a themed stamp to the back of your mail. Be sure to check out Enfield Post. You can head over to enfieldpost.com and explore all the different vintage stamps you can use on your next card or letter. That's ENFIELDPOST on Instagram and enfieldpost.com for your wedding and vintage postage needs. Enfield Post is the official postage stamp sponsor of the Sent from Disneyland podcast. The front of our next postcard has Sleeping Beauty Castle. To the right, you can see the Matterhorn, plus there are guests walking over the moat and on the drawbridge. In the moat, you can see 3 white swans, and if you look closely in the back, you can see the wishing well and some of the Snow White statues. On the back it reads, "Swans in the Moat. At dusk, swans glide gently by the drawbridge to Sleeping Beauty Castle, which guards the entrance to a world that is timeless. It's postmarked July 21st, 1992, with a Long Beach cancel and a 19-cent hot air balloon postage stamp, Scott number 2930. I assume they visit the park on Monday, July 20th, 1992, when park hours were from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. The weather was a high of 84 and a low of 68. It's addressed to Mrs. R. L. McCollum of McMinnville, Oregon. It reads, 7/21/92. Dear Mom, had a great time here yesterday. The kids did so much they wanted to stay until closing. We did. We left at 1:01 a.m. Today, to the beach. See you. Love, Martha. Had a fun evening. I rode on the merry-go-round, and it's a small world. Live life to its fullest. Jane. This postcard was sent by the same family as the last postcard. I assume they made a yearly trip down from Oregon at the end of July and before school started. I also noticed that the writing on both cards included 2 different handwriting styles, meaning Martha likely forgot to sign her name back in 1991. Some changes they would have seen between the years would have included the closure of Videopolis Station of the Disneyland Railroad, the ending of the Disney Afternoon overlays, the addition of Fantasmic, and the start of construction for Mickey's Toontown. One of the most interesting things they could have seen in July of 1992 is the World According to Goofy parade. This parade was to celebrate Goofy's 60th birthday. It started on June 19th and ran for 5 months. The first float had Ludwig von Drake on a stack of books, with dancers around the float holding oversized books. The next section started with the book float, opened up to the page for the pre-hysterical age. There was a Stegosaurus and a caveman version of Goofy on a float with other cavemen, and a sign that read, Goofysaurus Tar Bath Resort. The dancers around the float were dressed very similar to the Flintstones, and they were followed by a Goofyosaurus float, a brontosaurus with Goofy's face. Egyptian Days was the next section, with another book float open to the page with King Tut drawn on it, suggesting that the Egyptian version of Goofy was a great golfer. This section also included the legendary Goofy golf ball character. The next float had Clarabelle Cow as Cleopatra, and the main float had a giant Goofy Sphinx and King Tut himself, the Fairway Pharaoh. There were also a few Goofy mummies along with the dancers. Continuing with the timeline, the next section began with a book open to the Renaissance. This section focused on Italy and food, with some living statues. One was holding a pizza shield and another a pizza discus, and on the back of the float was the giant Leaning Tower of Pizza. The final section of the parade was Goofy Runs for President, with Goofy in exercise gear. There was a giant Goofy bus with Donald, Pluto, and Chip and Dale. Following the bus on foot was Roger Rabbit and some dancers with an eagle character, the Statue of Liberty, a Revolution-era dressed man, and Abraham Lincoln in running shorts. The final float had Goofy on a treadmill with the phrase, Goofy Runs for President of Disneyland on the front. Behind him was Max, Mickey, and Minnie, with a giant blow-up Goofy wearing an Uncle Sam costume. After the 1992 election, the final float changed from Goofy running for president to Goofy being named Man of the Year. The last performance of the World According to Goofy parade was on November 15, 1992. This incoming postcard is sponsored by the Art Throwdown. Art Throwdown, or ATD, is an online craft hour on Instagram, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific. Be sure to check out Monday's ATD, which is usually hosted by paper artist Russ Romano. I've seen many amazing art projects, learned about awesome postmarks, postage stamp history, and a lot more on different episodes. It's great to stop in for an hour to watch someone craft or design something unique. Each host brings something a little different to each show. I'll list some of the regular hosts, or you can follow Russ Romano 2021 on Instagram. The front of my incoming postcard has Goofy on a flying glider plane. Underneath him is Donald Duck flying a biplane with Daisy standing on the top of the wings. Minnie Mouse is next, flying a pink plane throwing out flowers, while Huey, Dewey, and Louie are skywriting the words Disney Ambassador Hotel. On the bottom, you can see Pluto sitting next to Mickey Mouse, who's dressed as a director, behind a camera, and if you look closely, you can see a small hidden Mickey cloud just above them. It's postmarked November 24th, 2023, with a U.S. Navy cancel and a Soapberry Forever postage stamp, Scott number 5418. It reads, Clocky, here's a postcard from Japan. This place is incredible, and I think you would love it. I'm keeping my eyes open for mailboxes for you. Wish you and Misty were here. Peace, Mr. Daps. Thank you so much for the postcard, Mr. Daps. I love seeing your photos and videos of Japan. I visited there almost 25 years ago. Unfortunately, I did not get to go to Tokyo Disneyland, but love the tour of Osaka and some of the amazing historical sites of the area. I also love this hotel-specific postcard. I've seen some for their other hotels, and it's nice to see a unique postcard option when visiting the resort hotels. I did see your photo of the one mailbox you found in Tokyo Disneyland. Next time I'll send you with a detailed map for the others. Also, thanks for the mailbox merch. I can't get enough of the mini mailboxes or the mailbox stamp set you and my friend Brian have sent to me. Thanks for listening to Sent from Disneyland. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and tell your friends. It would be helpful to share your favorite episode to a friend or on social media. There are over 200 to choose from. It would also help to leave a 5-star rating and comment at whatever podcast platform you use. If you'd like to support the show financially, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/sentfromdisneyland. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Sent from Disneyland or on Twitter at Sent from Disney. For questions and comments, send me a postcard addressed to Sent from Disneyland, P.O. Box 44, Hood, California, 95639. This podcast is not affiliated with Disney, the United States Postal Service, or any post office or Disney properties. Opinions expressed on this podcast belong to its host and guests of the Sent from Disneyland podcast.